My sister cracked the frame of my $2,500 wheelchair at my mother's birthday party, and while I was still standing there on my bad hip, she said it to 30 people. Relax, she barely uses it, she just likes the parking spot. The laugh went around the yard like something passed hand to hand. It was the 4th of April, a Saturday, the first warm one that year. My mother had turned 61 and wanted a cookout, which in our family means folding tables on the grass, and my mother in a chair by the cooler, telling everyone she didn't want a fuss. I had walked in from the car under my own power that day. 30 steps maybe. Good day. That is the whole trap of what I have, and my sister has always known it was a trap, and she has always used it as one. Delaney is 4 years older than me. She had my chair by the handles before I got the food out of my hands. She said she wanted to show everyone something. Then she sat down in it, at the top of my mother's driveway, and her husband raised his phone and the little ring light he keeps in the car, and she pushed off. It is a rigid titanium frame. It is not a toy, and it is not a scooter. It is built to hold one body at one weight in one position, and it is fitted to mine. The seat width, the axle, the angle of the backrest, all of it measured on me in a clinic room in Dublin, Ohio, by a man who made me sit still for 40 minutes. Delaney hit the seam where the driveway meets the sidewalk going faster than anyone should, and the front casters chattered, and she screamed the way people scream on a ride they paid for. I heard it before I saw it, a short dry sound like a knuckle. The frame cracked under the seat tube, a hairline that ran back toward the axle plate and stopped, the way a windshield stops. And my sister sat there in the wreck of the only reason I get to leave my apartment, laughing, out of breath, and looked up at everyone's faces and said the thing about the parking spot. My mother said, "She's only joking." She has said that sentence to me for 11 years. 4 of them before there was anything to jokes about. It arrives the way a napkin arrives. Nobody in my family has ever had to finish a thought about me, because she keeps a lid within reach. Then Delaney got up out of my chair, brushed the back of her jeans, and held her hand out to me, palm up, and said, "Can I take the placard? I'm blocked in and Grant's got the cooler." The placard. The blue hanging tag with my name on the back of it. The one the state issued to me after a physician signed a form saying what my legs do and don't do. She wanted it so she could move her car 11 feet. Here is what I did. I want you to hear it exactly, because everything that came after came out of it. I did not shout. I pressed my thumbnail into the pad of my index finger until I could feel the little crescent of it, which is a thing I do instead of talking. I looked at my chair on its side with the sun on the cracked tube and I said, "No, but do me a favor. Send me the whole clip, the full one before you trim it. I want to keep it." Delaney laughed again, because she thought I was being a good sport. She said, "You are so weird," and she put her hand down. I am Una Frost. I was 29 years old that afternoon, and I am an auditor. I read hospital billing records for a living, which means I spend 40 hours a week looking at 2 pieces of paper that say different things and deciding which one is lying. If you have ever been the person in your family that everybody agrees to laugh about, stay with me, because this one takes a while to land, and I want you there when it does. Follow along if you're listening, and tell me in the comments whether you'd have taken the placard out of your pocket. I'll tell you what I did with mine. The clip came through Monday night at 9:12 p.m. because Delaney does everything late. The version she had already posted was 1 minute and 4 seconds long. The file she sent me was 1 minute and 9 seconds longer. I watched those 9 seconds twice, in bed, with the phone very close to my face and the sound low. Then I got up, plugged the phone into my laptop, copied the file into 3 places, and sat on the edge of my mattress in the dark for a long time with my hands flat on my knees. I am not going to tell you yet what is on them. I need you to understand something else first, and I need you to understand it the way I did, which was slowly. But I will tell you that at 11:40 that night, I opened a blank document and typed one line at the top, and the line was a date, and under the date I wrote the word hours. I bought that chair in September of 2021 with my first full paycheck after I went back to work. Not the first paycheck, the first full one, after the short-term disability ran out and the deductions settled and the number on the stub stopped being an apology. $2,500 for the frame and the fitting. My insurance covered a chair, technically. It covered a chair the way a hotel covers a bed. What it covered weighed 38 pounds and would have wrecked my shoulders in 3 years. And shoulders are how I get upstairs, into cars, out of bathtubs. So I paid for the light one myself. I was hit by a car in June of 2019. I was 22. It's an incomplete injury, which is a phrase that has cost me more than the injury has. Incomplete means some signal gets through. Incomplete means on a good day I can walk from a parking space to a door. Incomplete means my legs will hold me for about 30 steps and then quietly stop taking my calls. And if I don't sit down in the next few seconds, I go down wherever I am. Incomplete means every single person who has ever seen me stand up out of that chair has filed it somewhere, and about a third of them file it under so she can walk. My family filed it there in the first month and never took it out. My brother didn't. Teddy is 19. He has Down syndrome and he lives with our mother, and he has pushed me up the ramp at the back of her house in the rain more times than every other person in my life combined. And he has never once asked me why I walked in and rolled out. Because it isn't a question he needs answered to be decent to me. That is the reason I never fought back in that house. Not fear. Teddy. Every argument I ever won in my mother's kitchen, Teddy paid for over the following week. His shows, his phone, his ride to the Y, all of it withheld while my mother told him it was because of the mood I'd put her in. So I stopped winning arguments. I went quiet. 11 years of quiet, and my mother started calling it my temperament. There is one more thing about my family and the state of Ohio, and it is the whole floor under this story. In November of 2022, my mother sat me down and told me she'd found a program. A self-directed waiver. The state pays a caregiver for in-home hours, and the person receiving the care picks the caregiver, and the caregiver can be a family member. Delaney had just quit her job. My mother said it would be good for everyone. She said Delaney could look in on me, and Delaney could get paid a little, and my mother would sign as my authorized representative, so I wouldn't have to deal with the paperwork on bad days. I said yes. I want that on the record, in my own voice. I said yes, because I was 13 months out from a bad winter, and I was tired. And because when your mother offers you the first help she has ever offered you, you take it before she notices she offered. Delaney came by twice that first month. She has not been to my apartment on a weekday in 3 years. I never made an issue of it, because I didn't need her, and because making an issue of it would have cost Teddy a week. I assumed she was drawing a small check for very little. I assumed nobody was looking. I was right about the second part. What I did not know, sitting on the edge of my bed on the 6th of April with a 9-second file in 3 folders, was that my mother's signature was on something. That there was a stack of paper somewhere in an office in Columbus, with my name at the top of it, and my mother's handwriting at the bottom, 41 months deep, and that not one page of it had ever been shown to me. Delaney had 18 weeks left of believing the driveway was the worst thing she would ever do to me. I had a request form and a deadline she didn't know existed. There is a rule where I work, and it is the only professional thing I have ever believed in. You do not accuse, you request. I audit revenue integrity for a hospital system, which means when a chart says a patient got 90 minutes of therapy and the schedule says the therapist was in a different building, I don't call anyone a thief. I write a letter. I ask for the record. The record is the thing that ends the conversation. And the beautiful part, the part I have watched grown men not understand for 6 years, is that the record does not care who is asking or how quietly they ask. On the 13th of April, I sent a written request to the fiscal intermediary. That's the payroll agency the state uses to process timesheets for the self-directed program. I asked for copies of every timesheet submitted under my name from November of 2022 through the current pay period, along with the corresponding remittance detail. I didn't have to explain myself. I'm the participant. They're my records. I typed it at my kitchen table on a Monday morning before work with my coffee going cold, and I read it 4 times, because the tone of a letter like that matters more than the content. Angry gets forwarded to legal. Confused gets a phone call. Boring gets processed. I made it boring. Their auto-reply said 30 business days. 30 business days is 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a long time to sit at your mother's table on Sundays and pass the potatoes, and I want to be honest about what 6 weeks of that does to a person. It does not make you noble. It makes you very, very calm. in the way that a room gets calm before weather. She had posted the driveway video that Sunday, before I was out of bed. It did well. 400,000 views by the end of that week, which for her is a good week but not a great one. I want to tell you about my sister's job because it is not a side detail, it is the engine. Delaney has 62,000 followers. The account is her face and my life. It is called something with the word sister in it, and it is 3 years of videos in which my sister, in soft lighting, in her car, in a Target parking lot, describes the weight of caring for her disabled sister. 12-hour days, nights she doesn't sleep. The bathroom. She has done a video about the bathroom. I have never in my life needed my sister in a bathroom, and there are 11,000 people who have watched her cry about it. Her husband Grant runs the camera and the sponsorships. Her friend Bree runs the comments, and when someone asks a hard question, Bree answers it before Delaney has to. For 3 years I let that account exist about 10 inches from my face and said nothing, because saying something meant a week of Teddy's shows being off, and because, and this is the part I'd take back if I could take back anything, because I thought she was only stealing my dignity. On the 19th of April, I sat down with my laptop and started watching all of it. I began with the most recent year and worked backward. Not for feelings, for dates. Every one of those videos carries a date. Every one of them has weather in the window, or a jacket, or a coffee cup with a seasonal sleeve, or a car in the background with a plate. She geotagged the early ones because she didn't know better yet. She stopped in 2024, but by then she'd built the habit of saying it out loud. So, it's Tuesday, I'm heading to my sister's. Because talking to the camera like it's a friend is the whole trick of what she does. The 11th video I opened was from the 10th of March that same year. My sister in her kitchen, hair up, tired face on. She says she's been at my place all day Tuesday. She says she'll be back Wednesday. She says she doesn't know how she's still standing. On the 10th of March, I was in Cincinnati at a 2-day coding compliance conference, on a hotel invoice, on a badge photo, on the group picture the vendor posted. I wrote it in the document under the word hours. March 10th, one line. Then I kept going, and I want you to know that I did not feel triumphant. I felt sick, and then bored, and then something colder than either, because by the end of that first weekend, the document was not a list of grievances anymore. It was a spreadsheet. I closed the laptop at 2 in the morning and looked at my chair against the wall with the crack in it, taped with electrical tape because a crack in titanium doesn't heal and doesn't wait, and I thought, she has been telling 62,000 strangers how many hours she spends on me. Somebody else was counting those hours too. Teddy called me on a Thursday to tell me the bus schedule had changed. That is the kind of thing my brother does. He carries a folded paper bus schedule in his jacket even though it's on his phone, because paper doesn't die at 4 in the afternoon, and he had noticed that the 82 now leaves the transit center at 6:18 instead of 6:12, and he wanted me to know in case I ever took it, which I don't. We talked for 11 minutes, about 6 minutes. That Sunday at my mother's, Delaney was telling a story about the driveway. She'd started telling it as a story about how I have no sense of humor, and she said it happened at Easter. Teddy said, no, it was the 4th. Delaney said, Ted, it doesn't matter. He said, Easter was the 5th. Mom's birthday was the 4th. It was Saturday. I know because I set up the tables Saturday. There was a small pause in that kitchen, the kind where somebody's about to be correct, and everybody would rather they weren't. My mother said, Teddy, let your sister tell her story. He looked down at his plate and said, okay. I have thought about that okay more than about anything my sister said in the driveway. My brother had the date right. He had it right because he had done the work of setting up the tables, and he was told to put it down like a fork. Later he came out to the driveway while I was getting into my car and he said, quiet, so it stayed in the driveway. It was the 4th, though. And I said, it was the 4th, write it down somewhere for me. I said, in my phone? I said, anywhere you want. I has an old phone. 3 generations old, cracked screen, my mother's hand-me-down, and he uses the voice recorder on it the way other people use a notebook. Because typing is slow for him, and he does not like being slow in front of people. He records himself saying what day it is and what he did. He has done it for years. My mother thinks it's a habit. Bree once put a clip of him doing it on the account with a caption about how sweet it was. That week I did 2 more quiet things. I downloaded every public video on my sister's account, all of them in order, with the file dates intact. onto a drive that lives in my desk at work. Because the one thing I know from 6 years of audits is that people delete. And I emailed the manufacturer of my chair and asked for a written assessment of the frame. Not a repair. An assessment, on letterhead, with the serial number and the damage described by somebody with credentials. They wrote back in 9 days. A cracked seat tube on a rigid titanium frame is not repairable to spec. The frame is condemned. Replacement, with the same fitting and components, $2,900, because prices had moved. I printed it and put it in a folder and did not tell one living person it existed. I had asked my sister for the whole clip so I could keep it. I had asked the state for my own paperwork. I had asked a company for a piece of letterhead. 3 requests. Nobody had said no to any of them. Nobody had even asked why. That is the part nobody tells you about being the family joke. You are given an enormous amount of room because nobody watches a person they've decided is harmless. In the middle of May, I did something I had never done, which was ask a stranger for advice about my own family. There's a legal aid office on the Near East Side that handles disability rights. I told the intake person I had a question about a self-directed waiver, and she gave me 20 minutes with a man named Wendell Shaw, who is somewhere past 60 and keeps his reading glasses pushed up into his hair and has the particular patience of a person who has heard the beginning of this story about 400 times. I didn't give him names, I gave him the shape. Participant on a self-directed waiver. Paid caregiver is a sibling. Authorized representative is the parent. Participant has reason to believe the timesheets are not accurate, and the same caregiver, under the same provider number, is billing for a second person in the same household. He stopped me there. He said, "Same provider number for both of them?" I said yes. I took the glasses out of his hair and did not put them on, which I learned later is what he does when he's about to say something he doesn't enjoy saying. He said, "Then I need you to hear the order of operations, because everybody gets this wrong and it costs the wrong person. If you walk into the Attorney General's office tomorrow with what you've got, the first thing that happens is not an arrest. The first thing that happens is a suspension. They suspend her provider number, and every claim attached to that number stops the same afternoon. Yours and his. Then somebody has to authorize a new provider for each of you before anybody gets a human being back in the house." I said, "How long does that take?" He said, "For you, 60 days, 90 if it's messy. And it will be messy." I said, "And for him?" He said, "For him it takes exactly as long as it takes whoever holds his paperwork to pick up a pen." Who holds his paperwork? I said, "My mother." He said, "Then it takes forever." And I sat there in a folding chair in a legal aid office with my hands on my knees and understood the exact size of the room I was in. My mother would never sign anything that started by admitting my sister had done one thing wrong. She would let his hours lapse and tell him the county was slow, and Teddy's rides are how he gets to his program on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If I filed in May, the thing that would happen in June is that my brother would stay home, and my mother would tell him it was because of me, and she would be telling him the truth. I said, "So what makes it safe?" Wendell said, "He does. He needs his own representative, somebody who isn't your mother, whose only job is his services. So the week her number goes down, a new aide gets authorized for him instead of never." I said, "He can't do that. She's had control of everything since he turned 18. He said, "Did she ever go to probate?" I said I didn't know what that meant. He said, "Guardianship. It's a court proceeding, in front of a judge, with a doctor's report. If your mother never went to probate, then she is not his guardian. She's a representative, which is a form. He can replace her himself this month, if he wants to." He put the glasses down on the desk. "Nobody in your family has ever told him that, have they?" I said no. He said, "They rarely do." I said, "Can you be that person?" He said, "For a 19-year-old with a documented disability whose representative has a conflict? Yes, but not in 20 minutes and not for free, and not until he and I have met a few times, because I don't sign for people I haven't talked to, and he has to ask me, not you." That was the 11th of May. I want to be very clear, because I know how this sounds from the outside, and I have had months to think about how it sounds. From the 11th of May until the 6th of August, I had enough in a folder to end my sister, and I did not use it. Not because I was afraid, because using it in May meant Teddy sat in that house for 90 days with nobody coming. So I waited, and the price of waiting was paid entirely by me in public, and my sister spent the summer collecting the interest. The 19th of June is the day I stopped being able to describe this as a disagreement. Delaney had been having a slow month. Her numbers were flat, and Grant had told her at my mother's, on the 4th, because Easter was the 5th, that the algorithm was punishing her for not posting enough family. So she made a video with my brother in it. She set the ring light up in my mother's living room and put Teddy on the couch and told him they were going to do a fun one. Then she asked him questions. Not cruel questions. That's what people don't understand about my sister, and it's why she's good at this. She asked him whether he knew how much a wheelchair costs, and he said he didn't know, and she said guess, and he guessed a number that was wrong, and she made a face at the camera. She asked him if he thought I could walk. He said, sometimes. She asked him how often. He said, I don't know how often. She let it sit. She let 3 full seconds of my brother not knowing something sit there on camera. And then she looked into the lens and said, out of the mouths of babes. 200,000 views. The comments said what they were supposed to say. They said even he knows. They said the family always knows. Bree pinned one of them. Teddy watched it. Of course he watched it. He is 19, not 6, and he has a phone, and he has friends at his program who have phones, and one of them showed him on the Monday. I didn't understand at first, then he did. I went into my mother's kitchen and said he wanted it taken down, and he said it 4 or 5 times, and he got loud, because my brother gets loud when he is not being heard, which is the same thing that happens to everyone, except that when he does it, a word gets attached to it. My mother took his phone. For a week. For being. And I have this in her own words, because she said it to me on the phone on Friday when she called to tell me she'd handled it, for being worked up and ruining Delaney's shot, and needing to learn that the world doesn't stop. They took the recorder out of his hands as a punishment for objecting to a video about how little he understands. I said, Mom, give him the phone back. She said, Una, she's only joking. And I sat in my car in the parking garage at work with the engine off and the phone hot against my ear, and I said nothing at all for about 6 seconds. And then I said, okay. She said, good, that's all I wanted. That was the last conversation I had with my mother in which I was still trying. I drove home. I got the folder out of my desk drawer. I put the manufacturer's letter on the left, the printout of the March 10th conference badge in the middle, and the drive with 3 years of my sister's face on it on the right. And I looked at those 3 things on my kitchen table for a long time. Then I opened the document under the word hours, and I typed a date at the bottom of it. Not a date that had happened, a date I was choosing. I gave myself until the 6th of August. Not because anything happened on the 6th of August. Because Wendell had said he needed a few meetings with Teddy before he'd sign, and Teddy's program runs Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I counted the Tuesdays and Thursdays between June and August, and there were enough of them. 7 weeks. My sister had 7 weeks to keep being herself in front of a camera that dates everything it touches. I have never in my life been more polite to anyone than I was to my sister that summer. I went to Sunday dinner every week. I brought a dish. I asked Grant about his truck. When Delaney told the driveway story, and she told it 4 more times that summer, and it got better each time, the way her stories do, I let her tell it. Once I even laughed, at the right place, and I watched her whole face open up, because my sister has never been able to tell the difference between being forgiven and being finished with. I got Teddy's phone back for him on the 3rd day of that week, by the way. I bought him a different one. Not a new one, a refurbished one, $40 at a shop on Cleveland Avenue, and I gave it to him in my car, and told him it was for the bus schedule. He asked if he was allowed. I said it was his. He said, does Mom know? And I said, it's yours, Teddy. And he held it in both hands the whole way to his program. He started recording again that week. I didn't ask him to. I want that clear, and I have said it under oath since. I did not ask my brother to record anything ever. On the 26th of June, an envelope came from the state. Annual redetermination. Every participant in the program signs off once a year on their plan of care and the services as authorized. Hours, tasks, the caregiver of record. My signature had gone on that form 3 times before, in 3 different years, except it hadn't. My mother had signed as my representative, and I had never once seen the page. They had my address now, mine, not my mother's. Every notice for 3 years had gone to her house, because hers is the box she checked. Due the 2nd of July. I read it 11 times. And I understood, sitting there with a form on my knee, that I was holding the only moment in the entire year when the state of Ohio would look directly at me and ask me a question. Here is what I did not do. I did not sign it saying everything was accurate. I have heard people say they would have. Sign it, keep her comfortable, spring the trap later. If I had signed that page attesting the hours were as submitted, I would have lied to the payer in writing, and I would have stopped being the person this happened to and started being the second name on the indictment. My hands stay clean, or none of it counts. What I did was 2 pieces of paper, and they went in the same envelope. The first was a request for an extension of the redetermination deadline, on the grounds that I had requested my service records in April and had not received them, and could not attest to hours I had never been shown. That is not a trick. That is a sentence a caseworker reads 4 times a day. The second was a written notice of disputed records, addressed to the fiscal intermediary, stating that I had reason to believe timesheets submitted under my participant number did not reflect services delivered, and requesting that the submissions be preserved. Preserved, one word, the most violent word I have ever written down. Then I drove to my mother's house, because Delaney had asked me to come by, and my sister met me at the door with a bakery box. It was a lemon cake, which is the cake my mother likes, not the cake I like, but the gesture was for an audience of 1, and I was not it. Delaney put it on the counter and said she'd been thinking about the driveway, and she felt bad about the chair. She said she'd get me a new one eventually. She said things had been tight. Then she slid a piece of notebook paper across the counter. She had written it herself, 4 lines. That we considered the matter closed as sisters, that I wasn't going to bring the chair up again, and that neither of us would say anything about it to anybody else. There was a line for my name and a line for hers, and she had already signed hers, in the big loose handwriting she has had since she was 14. My mother stood at the end of the counter with a dish towel and did not breathe. I picked up the pen. I want you to understand that the piece of paper my sister wrote on a Thursday afternoon has exactly as much power over the state of Ohio as a napkin. It does not mention a court. It does not mention money. It is 2 sisters agreeing to stop talking about a chair, which my sister has always believed is the same thing as being right. What it could do, the only thing it could do, was tell my sister she had won. And my sister needed very badly to be told that, because a person who thinks she has won stops deleting things. I signed it. I said, "Let it go, it's a chair." Delaney hugged me. She actually hugged me, hard, and over her shoulder I watched my mother's face come loose with relief, and my mother said, "See, that's my girls." Delaney posted a photo of the lemon cake that night with a caption about how family works things out. 11 days later, her pay period came back flagged. She called me about it on a Tuesday, furious from her car. The payroll agency had put a documentation hold on 1 pay period. No payment until the submitted hours could be verified against the service plan. She read me the letter in the parking lot of a Kroger with the engine running, and she said the word bureaucrats twice, and she said somebody in Columbus had obviously typed something wrong. And did I know how long it takes to get a human being on the phone at these places? I said, "That sounds frustrating." She said, "It's my money, Una." And I sat in my apartment with my hand flat on my kitchen table and looked at the folder on the shelf above the microwave, and I said, "I know it feels like that." She missed it. She missed it entirely, the way you miss a step in the dark, and kept talking about the agency for another 6 minutes. That is the part I would not trade, not the ending, that 6 minutes. Because from that Tuesday forward, there were 2 people in every conversation I had with my sister who knew something, and only one of them was me. She would say a thing, and I would hear the thing, and behind it I would hear the sound of a page being date-stamped in an office she'd never been to. I don't want to make it prettier than it was. It is not a noble feeling. It is a warm, low, steady feeling, like standing near a radiator, and I let myself have it, because I had earned it in 6-minute increments for 11 years. She said, "You're being weird about this." I said, "I'm tired, it's been a long month." The records came on the 20th of July in a box. Not the summary, the originals. 45 months of scanned timesheets, 1 per week, each one with a caregiver line and a representative line. And the representative line had my mother's handwriting on it. Corinne Frost. 190 some signatures, every one of them the same tired loop on the C. 60 hours a week, $17.85 an hour. I ran the total 3 times, once by hand on paper, because I did not trust my own spreadsheet. $208,845. I said it out loud in my kitchen, to nobody. Then I said it again slower, the way you do with a number that will not fit in your mouth. For 3 years and 9 months, the state of Ohio had been paying my sister to be in my home 60 hours a week. 12 hours a day, 9 in the morning to 9 at night, Monday through Friday. Meal preparation, transfers, bathing assistance, medication management, accompaniment to medical appointments. I badge into a hospital at 10 of 8 in the morning. I badge out at 4:30. I have done that 4 days a week for 6 years, and there is an electronic record of every swipe. That is what stopped me first, before the money did. 60 hours a week of personal care is not a number anybody hands a woman with a full-time job. Somebody had to sit in an assessment and describe a person who could not transfer herself, could not make a meal, could not be left alone in the afternoon. I have never seen that assessment. I have never once been in the room for one. My mother has. And she had been paid to help me into the shower on the 11th of March, which is a day I know exactly, because on the 11th of March, I was on the vendor shuttle home from that conference in Cincinnati, and I have the seat receipt. And on the same page, my mother had signed to say she had personally verified it. Then I opened my own document, the one that started with the word hours, and I did what I do for a living. 2 pieces of paper. Which one is lying? 61 days. 61 separate days, spread across 3 years, on which my sister submitted a full shift of in-home care for me while publicly posting herself somewhere else. Not somewhere ambiguous. A resort in Cabo in February of 2024. 6 days, 2,000 miles away, 4 videos a day. A bachelorette weekend in Nashville. A wedding in Erie. She had, with her own hands, uploaded time-stamped evidence against herself to 62,000 people. Every day, for years, because that was the job. And there was one more column, and it took me until 3 in the morning to see it, and when I did I had to get up and walk to the sink and stand there. Delaney was also the paid caregiver of record for my brother. My mother, as Teddy's representative, had put her there in the spring of 2025, 28 hours a week for him, on his own authorization, out of his own budget. Separate participant number, separate sheet. And for Teddy, she actually went. That is the part I have never been able to fit into one sentence. Twice a week she drove him to his program and back, 25 minutes each way, because my mother made her, and because she needed the footage. Then she billed 28 hours. On 19 separate days, the 2 sheets put her in 2 places at the same time. Not approximately. The same clock hours, 9 to 5, at my address and at my mother's address, in her own handwriting, on 2 forms with 2 different participant numbers, submitted 11 days apart, so that nobody would ever lay them side by side. There is no version of that which is an error. A person can be careless about where they were. Nobody is careless about being in 2 houses at the same hour, 19 times. I sat back down. I opened the 9-second file, which I had not watched since April, and I watched it 1 time, and then I closed my laptop and put my hands over my face. I had been carrying it for 3 months as the worst thing my sister had ever said. As of that night, it was something else. It was the only piece of evidence in my possession that was about my brother, and I was 2 weeks away from a meeting where a lawyer I had not yet paid was going to decide whether my brother had someone standing between him and my mother. So I put it back in the folder. 14 days. That was the whole distance. And my sister spent every single one of them making it worse for herself, out loud, on camera, and I would like to tell you about all of it. On the 22nd of July, my sister announced a partnership. An adaptive equipment company. A real one. They make transfer boards and cushions and shower chairs, and they make rigid titanium frames, and one of their frames was leaning against my living room wall with electrical tape around the seat tube. $12,000 for a 6-month content agreement, announced in a video shot in my mother's living room, with Grant listed as the business contact because Delaney does not like doing email. She cried in the announcement. She said this was proof that caregivers get seen. I watched it at my desk at work with one earbud in, and when she said the company's name, I did not feel what you think I felt. I felt the specific, cold, professional pleasure of watching a file close itself. Because in April, I had emailed that company's clinical services department and asked for a written assessment of a cracked frame, serial number and all, and a woman in that department had written back on letterhead with the word condemned in it, and that letter was sitting in a folder in my desk drawer 4 feet from where I was sitting. I did not send them anything, not one word. It was not time, and it was not my move to make. It was theirs, and they did not know yet that they had a move. I closed the laptop and went to a meeting about outpatient coding. Then the series started. She called it The Ungrateful One. Not by name. She never used my name because Bree had told her a long time ago that naming people is how you get reported. She used my sister, which is a naming that everyone in a family of 30-person cookouts can read. 6 videos in 11 days. My sister explaining that some people take and take. My sister crying in her car about how you can give somebody your entire 20s and they will still make you feel like a villain. My sister saying, and I am quoting because I have the transcript, I do 12-hour days for her, and she signed a paper telling me she wouldn't sue me, like I'm nothing to her but a liability. She said the 12-hour days in a video posted at 8:20 on a Wednesday morning from a nail salon on Sawmill Road, with the salon's own name on the awning behind her, on a day her timesheet has her starting a shift at 7 a.m. Every one of those 6 videos went into the drive in my desk. I need to be honest about what that fortnight cost, because I have made it sound like a spreadsheet and it was not a spreadsheet. A woman at my job asked me if everything was okay at home. Somebody at my old physical therapy clinic sent me one of the videos with a question mark. My aunt called my mother. 2 people I went to high school with sent me messages that were, in their own way, kind. The kind where somebody tells you they always knew you were difficult, but they're here for you anyway. And on the 31st of July, my sister live-streamed outside my apartment building. She stood on the sidewalk on Indianola at 20 to 8 in the evening, with the light going orange behind her, and she said she just wanted to talk. She just wanted her sister to come down and tell people the truth. And 1,100 people watched it live. I came down. I want to tell you I planned that. I didn't. I came down because Mrs. Ocasio on the second floor is 81 and does not need this at her window, and because if I hadn't come down, my sister would have stayed there until somebody called somebody. I walked out the front door of my own building on my own legs, 7 steps, which was all I had that day, and I stood on the bottom step and held the railing and I did not say one word. Delaney turned the phone on me. She said, "There she is, walking." The comments. I read them later, all of them, because I am the kind of person who reads all of them. The comments said she's walking. I stood there for maybe 15 seconds. Then I sat down on the step, because I had to, because 7 was the number that night, and my sister filmed me sitting down and said, "Now watch this part." Grant laughed off camera, and then I looked up into the lens. Not at her, at the lens, at the 1,100 people. And I said the only sentence I said to her in public all summer. I said, "It's 7:41 on a Friday. Where are you supposed to be?" She didn't understand it. Neither did they. It got 300 replies calling me cryptic and cold and a few worse things. And Bree posted a comment underneath that said, "She plays it up. She's always been like this." And that comment got 400 likes and Bree left it up for 11 days. But the stream ran 41 minutes with a live timestamp on it from a public sidewalk on the 31st of July. And the standing schedule on every one of the 190-some sheets in that box had her inside my apartment on a Friday from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. I went back upstairs. I put ice on my hip. I opened the drive and made a copy of the stream before it expired, and I labeled the file with the date, and then I sat in the dark and let myself want it for about 10 minutes, which is the longest I let myself want anything that whole summer. 6 days later, on the 6th of August, Wendell Shaw called me and said he had met with my brother 3 times, and my brother had told him, without any prompting, what he wanted, and that he was prepared to sign on as Teddy's representative. He said, "He's a very clear young man, by the way. I don't know what you people have been told." I paid the retainer that afternoon. $900 from my savings, for a lawyer who was not mine. And then I went home and opened the folder and took out the 9 seconds. Here is what is on them. 1 minute and 4 seconds in, my sister's video ends. She has said the thing about the parking spot, and the laugh has gone around. And Grant lowers the phone toward his leg the way you do when you think you've stopped recording. He hasn't stopped recording. The frame goes sideways. You see grass, then a cooler, then my mother's shoes. And you hear my sister, off camera, close, in the voice she uses when there's no audience. Flatter, younger, bored. She says, "I'm putting Teddy's hours on my sheet again. He doesn't count them." And my mother, who has said she's only joking to me 11 years running, says, "Don't say that out loud." 9 seconds. The frame swings up, it ends. I had watched that in April, in bed, at 9:12 at night, 2 days after my sister cracked my chair, and I had understood two things at once. That my mother knew, not suspected, knew in a sentence with a verb. And that if I walked it into an office in April, the first person in that house to lose anything would be the boy whose hours were being moved. On the 7th of August, I drove everything to Wendell Shaw's office in a banker's box. 45 months of signed timesheets. My conference invoices, my shuttle receipt, my badge photo, a drive with 3 years and 1,100 videos on it, indexed by date, with 61 days flagged in red and 19 days flagged in black. A 41-minute live stream from a public sidewalk. A letter from a manufacturer with the word condemned in it. 6 videos titled The Ungrateful One, transcribed. A screenshot of a comment that said she plays it up, with the account name and the timestamp. And a 9-second audio file, transcribed by me, twice, because I wanted to be sure of the word again. Wendell went through it for 2 hours without saying anything except the occasional hum. Then he squared the timesheets and set his hand flat on top of them and said, "You understand that I represent your brother, not you." I said, "That's why I'm here." He said, "Then I'm going to tell you what I'd tell him. This doesn't go to the Attorney General from you. It goes from his counsel, with a request that his services be maintained during review, because he has a representative now, and that representative is me." He looked at me over the glasses. "Your services will still get frozen." I said, "For how long?" He said, 60 days, maybe 90. I said, "File it." The packet went to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Attorney General's office, and to the Ohio Department of Medicaid, and to the fiscal intermediary, on Monday the 10th of August. And then nothing happened for 9 days, which is exactly how it works, and which almost nobody can survive. Because in those 9 days my sister was busy. She came to my apartment on the 13th of August, which was a Thursday, at 10 in the morning, without calling. She had not stood in that room since the first month of it, since the November she signed on and came by twice and then stopped. She had a folder under her arm, and she was doing the version of herself she does for other people's mothers. Bright, quick, a little breathless, already talking before I had the door all the way open. The hold hadn't cleared. She had called the agency 11 times. The woman there had told her, and I could hear my sister repeating it back with the disbelief of someone who has never once been told no by a system, that the participant would have to verify the disputed periods. The participant, me. She sat down at my kitchen table. She looked at the loaner chair by the wall and did not mention it. She opened the folder. Blank timesheets. A stack of them, printed off the portal. The caregiver line already filled in with her name and her provider number in that big loose handwriting, and the hours already written in, 60, 60, 60, going back 5 weeks, and the participant's signature line empty on every single one. She turned the stack around and pushed it across my table toward me and said, "It's just to clear the backlog. It's the same hours as always. You just sign that you got the services." I looked at it for a while. I want to describe what that felt like accurately, because it was not rage. It was the feeling of watching somebody hand you the last thing you needed, wrapped, with a bow on it, while telling you it's a favor. I said, "I'm not signing those." She said, "Una, it's a formality." I said, "You wrote 60 hours on a week you were in Nashville." The room changed temperature. She has a face that does one thing when she is caught, which is that it goes very still while she decides which version of herself is going to speak next. She said, "That was a Saturday and Sunday. The hours are Monday to Friday." I said, "You were gone Thursday through Monday. You posted from the airport." And my sister looked at me across my own kitchen table. In the apartment she has been paid 11,700 hours to be inside of, and she said, "Okay, you know what? Fine. Then Mom signs them. She's my rep. She's your rep. I don't actually need you for this." I said, "Not anymore, she isn't." She didn't hear it. She was already gathering the stack. That is the thing I keep coming back to, I told her, out loud, in a flat voice, in the middle of a Thursday morning, and she was too busy being right to catch it. At the door she stopped and said the last thing she ever said to me as a person who thought she was winning. She said, "You know Teddy's the one who's going to get hurt if this doesn't clear. His hours are on the same account." I said, "Are they?" She said, "You know what I mean." And she left the stack. Not on purpose. She had one of them in her hand, and the rest slid off the table when she stood up, and she was annoyed and in a hurry, and she left 4 printed timesheets with her provider number on them and the hours pre-written on my kitchen floor. And I did not pick them up for about 6 minutes. Then I got a manila envelope out of my desk and put them in it and wrote the date on the front and drove them to Wendell Shaw's office on my lunch break. And he read the top one and set it down very carefully, the way you set down something that is not yours. He said, "She wrote the hours in first." I said, "Yes." He said, "On a suspended pay period." I said, "Yes." I took his glasses out of his hair and put them on the desk and looked out the window for a second, and then he said, "Ms. Frost, I have been doing this for a long time. Do not ever let anybody tell you that you were lucky." She had an event, that was the word she used, event, for the launch of her line with the company, at a venue on the near west side with a step and repeat banner and a caterer, on Wednesday the 19th of August at 6 p.m., 60 people invited, local morning show woman coming. Grant had ordered a neon sign of her logo. And on Sunday the 16th, at my mother's house, my sister took the placard. She didn't ask. She went out to my mother's car for a bag and came back in without it. And I noticed, because I always notice, that she had stopped at mine on the way. The blue tag was gone off my mirror. I said, "Delaney," she said, "I'm borrowing it for Wednesday. Parking down there is insane and I've got the sign in 4 boxes. My mother said, "Una, she's carrying equipment." I said nothing. I put my hand flat on the table. I did the thing with my thumbnail. And then I said, "And this is the only cruel thing I did all year, and I have decided I get to keep it." I said, "Take a picture at the event. I want to see the sign." She said, "Oh, okay." She hung my placard on her husband's mirror on the Wednesday, and Grant parked in the accessible space closest to the loading door of a venue with a camera on the corner of the building at 4:28 in the afternoon, and left it there for 2 hours and 10 minutes while they set up. 28 hours a week for my brother, 60 for me. A $12,000 contract with a company that makes the frame she cracked, and she used my parking placard to unload the neon sign. There is a thing people say about this kind of story, that the villain gets careless at the end. That's not what happens. She wasn't careless. She was exactly as careful as she had always been. It's just that being that person for 4 years generates paper at a rate no one can outrun. And on the 19th of August, 4 separate pieces of it arrived in the same 90 minutes. I was not there. I want to say that plainly, because people always assume I was standing at the back of the room. I was in my apartment on Indianola with a bag of frozen peas on my hip and my phone face down on the arm of the couch, and at 5:28 p.m. it buzzed, and it was my sister, sending me a picture of the neon sign, because I had asked her to. The sign said her name in pink cursive. She was standing under it with her arms out. Grant took it. She wrote, "Told you it was cute." I looked at it for a while. Then I turned the phone back over. Here is the order it happened in. I know the order because I have read it 4 times in a document with numbered paragraphs. At 5:35, before the doors opened, a woman from the equipment company's compliance office asked Grant to step out to the lobby. She had 2 things with her. One was a copy of a preservation of records letter that had reached their legal department the previous Thursday. The other was an internal file from their own clinical services department, dated the 29th of April, regarding a condemned rigid titanium frame, serial number ending in 912, damaged in a non-clinical incident, owner Una Frost, of Columbus, Ohio. Same last name as the woman whose face was on their banner. They terminated the agreement in the lobby, in writing, and demanded the return of the $12,000. And their people took the banner down before the caterer had finished setting out the glasses. At 6:20. And I know the minute because the intermediary's send log is an exhibit. My sister's phone got an email. Caregiver of record suspended pending investigation. Both participant numbers. All pending claims held. Do not submit further timesheets. At 6:31, my mother's phone got the same thing in a different envelope. Authorized representative authority under administrative review, both participants, effective immediately. She was at the event. She had done her hair. And at 6:38, a tow truck took Grant's pickup out of the accessible space by the loading door. Because on Monday the 17th, I had gone to a deputy registrar's office on Morse Road, on my lunch break, and reported my placard taken and in use without my authorization. They canceled the number and printed me a new one while I waited. It took 11 minutes and cost nothing, and that is the answer to the question I asked you at the beginning about what I did with mine. Hanging a canceled placard in a reserved space is something an officer can write on site. There were 2 officers at that event. Off-duty Columbus police, hired for crowd control out of the launch budget because Grant thought it looked professional. One of them walked the row at 6:30, the way they do, and read a canceled number off a tag hanging from a mirror. 2 hours and 10 minutes in a space with a wheelchair painted on the ground, on a placard belonging to the sister she had told 62,000 people barely uses her chair. My phone rang 19 times between 6:40 and midnight. I didn't answer, and I want to be honest about why. Not strategy. I didn't have anything to say. There is a moment in this kind of thing where you find out that the sentence you have been writing in your head for 4 years does not exist, because it was never a sentence. It was just weight. And the weight had come off, and what was left was a woman on a couch with frozen peas on her hip, 30 years old by then, listening to a phone buzz on a table. My mother came on Saturday. She had never been to my apartment. Not once in 4 years. She stood in the doorway and looked at the ramp in the hallway, and the grab bar by my kitchen sink, and the second chair, the heavy loaner from the clinic, 38 pounds, the one I'd been using since April. And something went across her face that I have decided not to interpret. She said, "They're saying $200,000. I said, 208. She said, "Una, your sister could go to prison." I said, "Yes." She started crying then, and she used the words people use. That I was tearing the family apart. That Delaney had made mistakes, but her heart was in the right place. That I had never said anything, not once, not one word in 4 years. And if it mattered so much, why hadn't I said anything? And I said, "Mom, you signed 190-some pages saying you watched her do it." She said, "I didn't read them." I said, "I know. That is the whole thing. That is my mother's entire defense, and it happens to be true, and it is the reason I did the one merciful thing I did in all of this, and I did it that same afternoon." I wrote a letter to the investigator, 2 paragraphs. I stated that to my knowledge my mother had never received any portion of the payments, that the funds went to a single account, not in her name, and that in my belief she signed what she was handed without reading it. All of that is true. I would not have written it if it weren't. It is also, according to Wendell, the difference between a woman who loses her authority and gets a recoupment demand and a woman who gets charged. I did not tell her I sent it. I have still never told her. Delaney got through to me once, on the last Sunday in August, from a number I didn't know. She was not screaming. She sounded about 14. She said, "Una, please, tell them to go easy." And I said the sentence I had been saving, and it was shorter than I expected it to be. I said, "I'm not asking them to go harder on you. I'm just not asking them to go easier." Then I said, "Don't call Teddy." She said, "Why would I call Teddy?" I said, "Because you don't know what he has." The investigator's name is Eileen Pruitt. She is with the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Attorney General's office, and she has, I would guess, about 25 years of this behind her, and she asks questions in a completely flat voice that I found restful. We sat in a conference room downtown on the 28th of August for 4 hours and 10 minutes. She did not ask me how I felt. She asked me whether I could identify my mother's handwriting. She asked me to walk her through the shuttle receipt. She asked me, 3 separate times in slightly different ways, whether I had ever asked my sister to record anything, and each time I said no, and the third time she nodded and wrote something, and I understood I had just passed the only test in the room. At the end she said, "You didn't come to us in April." I said no. She said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because my brother's services run through the same representative, and if I'd filed in April, he'd have been the first one sitting at home." She put her pen down. She said, "That's the correct answer, and about 1 person in 30 gives it." My services went on hold on the 2nd of September, exactly as Wendell said they would, and stayed on hold for 68 days. I want to sit on that for a second, because it is the part that gets skipped when people tell this story back to me like it's a movie. 68 days with no authorized in-home hours. I paid an agency out of pocket for 12 hours a week. A woman named Roz who has done this for a long time and who, on her first afternoon, looked at the electrical tape on my chair and said, "Oh, honey, no," and then never mentioned it again. It cost me $4,200 over 2 months. It emptied the account the new frame was supposed to come out of. That was the price, and I knew the price in May, and I paid it. Nobody was going to reimburse me for choosing the right order of operations. Teddy's hours never stopped, not one Tuesday, not one Thursday. That is what a separate representative buys you, and it cost $900, and it is the best money I have ever spent. My sister took her own account down on the 11th of September. Not the state, not the platform. Her. 62,000 followers, 3 years, 1,100 videos, gone in the time it takes to confirm a password. Because by the second week of September, people had begun going back through the archive themselves, and the timestamps were right there. They had always been right there. And somebody made a side-by-side of the Cabo videos and a screenshot of a public records summary. And it went further than anything my sister ever posted on purpose. She deleted it, which meant that on the day her lawyer asked for it, the only complete copy of my sister's 3-year confession was on a drive in a desk on the 4th floor of a hospital administration building, indexed by date, preserved on the 2nd of July by a letter with one word in it. Bree stopped commenting around then. She was interviewed by the investigator in November on the record and asked to read her own comment out loud, the one about how I play it up, and to state the date she posted it, and to confirm that it remained visible for 11 days. Grant moved out of my sister's house the week before Thanksgiving. The company's demand for the $12,000 had gone to him because he was the business contact, because Delaney does not like doing email. And on the 30th of October, in a hearing room on the 11th floor of a state office building, my mother sat at a table across from 2 people from the Department of Medicaid and was asked to review the timesheets she had attested to as authorized representative. I was there. So was Wendell, because Teddy's authorization was on the same agenda. Teddy was not, Wendell wouldn't have it, and my mother had asked twice. They put a page in front of her. They asked her to confirm that the signature on the representative line was hers. She said yes. They asked her to read the attestation printed above the signature line, out loud, for the record. It is one sentence. I have it memorized now. I certify that I have personally verified that the services documented on this timesheet were provided as described. She got about halfway. Then she stopped and put her hand up and asked if she could have some water. They waited. They were not unkind about it. They waited, and somebody got her a paper cup, and then she read it again from the beginning, all the way through, in her own voice, in a room with a recording device on the table. Then they put down the next page and asked her to do it again. They did that 9 times. My mother has spent 11 years ending sentences about me with 3 words. It took a woman with a state ID badge and a stack of paper to make her finish one. Eileen Pruitt was there that day to collect the recording of the hearing, which is a thing her unit does when an administrative file is going to end up in a criminal one. She caught me in the hallway afterward by the elevators. She said, "Do you know your brother came to see us?" I said no. She said, "The 18th of September, he came alone." Hy took the 82 to the transit center and transferred, which is 2 buses and a 9-minute walk at the other end. And he had a paper schedule folded in his jacket pocket, and he came into a state office building on a Friday morning and told the woman at the front desk that he needed to talk to whoever was in charge of his sister's case. She said he was very polite about it and completely immovable. He put an old phone on the counter. Cracked screen, 3 generations out of date, the one my mother had taken away in June, and I had replaced in a car on Cleveland Avenue with a $40 refurb, which he had kept anyway, both of them, because Teddy does not throw things away. There were 1,400 and some voice memos on it. My brother has been recording the same thing for years. He says the date. He says the day of the week. He says what he did. And then, and this is the part I did not know, the part that took the floor out from under me in a hallway on the 11th floor, he says who came. Tuesday, February 11th. I went to program. Mom worked late, nobody came. Saturday, March 1st. I had cereal. Una came and we went to the library. Delaney didn't come. Friday, June 19th. Delaney made a video of me. I said I don't know. Monday, June 22nd. Kevin showed me the video. I don't like it. I want it down. 4 years of a 19-year-old boy narrating an empty house into a phone because he liked having a record of his own days. Pruitt said, "We asked him why he brought it in." I said, "What did he say?" She said, "He said Delaney says I don't understand things, and then he said I understand." I sat down on the bench by the elevators. There is a bench there. I have thought since that they probably put it there on purpose, in that building, outside those rooms. I did not cry in front of her. I got to the parking garage first. Here is the part I have the hardest time telling. In the middle of November, Teddy asked me to take him to the bank. He has an account. He has had it since he was 17. There is money in it from the paid work he does through his program, and birthday money, and a summer where he and another young man collected cans for a church, and he had been adding to it for 2 years and 11 months toward 2 specific things, which he had written on an index card and taped inside his closet door. A yearly transit pass. And the copay for a job coach, the one who helps you keep a job once you get one, which is the part nobody funds. $1,180. He had heard my mother on the phone saying my account was empty. He had heard the number 4,200. He had put it together the way he puts everything together, correctly and without telling anyone. He handed me the withdrawal slip in the car, already filled out, in his handwriting, which slopes down to the right at the end of every line. I said, "Teddy, no." He said, "It's for the chair." I said, "This is your pass. This is your coach." And my brother looked out the windshield at the parking lot of a credit union on Carl Road and said, "You didn't tell them in April, because of me," Mr. Shaw said. I said, "That was my choice." He said, "This is mine. I want to tell you, I refused. I have gone back over it 100 times, whether taking it was the right thing or whether I should have handed it back and let him have his pass. And I have landed where I have landed, which is this. My brother had spent 19 years being the person whose choices were things other people managed, and he had just walked into a state office building alone and ended a felony. And if I had given that slip back, I would have been the 4th person in his family that year to tell him he didn't understand. So I said thank you. I said it looking at him, and then I ordered the frame. It came in January, $2,900, 1,180 of it is my brother's. He asked if he could be there when they fitted it. He sat in the clinic room in Dublin for 40 minutes while a man measured me, the way a man measured me in 2021, and when it was done, Teddy walked around it twice and said, "It's the same one." I said, "It's the same one." He said, "Good." The state moved in December, all at once, the way institutions do after months of looking like they are doing nothing. My mother was permanently removed as authorized representative for both participants and barred from acting as an authorized representative in any Ohio Medicaid program. That one is not a criminal finding. It is an administrative letter, 4 paragraphs, and it ends her involvement in the affairs of her 2 disabled children by function of a database. My sister was indicted on the 9th of December. Medicaid fraud, theft, tampering with records. The tampering count is the one her lawyer fought hardest, and it is the one that came from her own hand. She had gone back into the intermediaries portal in August, after the suspension email, and edited 2 submitted entries, which the system logs, because of course it logs, and she was excluded. That word does not sound like much next to the others, and it is the one that will outlive all of it. Exclusion from participation in federal and state healthcare payment programs, 5 years at a minimum, and in practice the end of it, because nobody in this industry hires back off that list. My sister spent 4 years building a public identity as a caregiver. She will not be paid to care for anyone, anywhere in this country, for a very long time, and probably never again. Teddy moved out on the 3rd of January, not because of any of this, or not only. Wendell had put him on a waiting list in August, the way a lawyer does when he actually listens to a 19-year-old for 3 sessions, and a spot came up in a supported living apartment 20 minutes from me, near a bus line, with 2 other young men and staff who are there in the evenings. My mother did not fight it. I think she believed until the last week that he wouldn't go. I was there when he left, because he asked me to be. He had 2 duffel bags and a laundry basket and the index card from inside his closet door, which he had peeled off and put in his jacket pocket with the bus schedule. My mother stood in the kitchen with a dish towel, in the same place she had stood in July with the lemon cake, and she said, "You'll call me." Teddy said, "Yes." She said, "You know I love you." And my brother, who has been in that kitchen every day of his life, said the only unkind thing I have ever heard him say, and he said it gently, which made it worse. He said, "Mom, I'm going somewhere people actually come." Then he picked up the laundry basket. Eileen Pruitt called me in the middle of January to close out something on her end. Before she hung up, she said there was a line in the summary she thought I should have. She said the unit had reconstructed the service record for the full 45 months, the timesheets, the deposition dates, the archive, and the memos off a 19-year-old's phone, which had turned out to be the single most useful thing in the file because they were contemporaneous, and they were daily, and they were about nothing. And she said, "Ms. Frost, I want you to hear how this reads in our summary. According to these records, for 45 months, you were a person that nobody showed up for. That's not a feeling, that's the finding." I said thank you, and I got off the phone and I sat at my kitchen table with my hands flat on it for a long time. 11 years of She's Only Joking, 4 years of a camera pointed at my life, a driveway with 30 people in it. And it took a stranger with a case number to say the sentence out loud, in a flat voice, on a Tuesday, with no one else in the room. That was the moment. Not the tow truck, not the banner coming down. A woman on the phone reading me a line out of a summary, and my own name in it, and the word finding. There was one more piece of paper, and it was mine, and it was the smallest one. I filed it on the 9th of September, 3 weeks after the launch, in municipal court. Not small claims. The damages ran past the $6,000 ceiling. $9,200, the $2,900 for the frame, the $4,200 in agency care, the loaner rental, the cushion that had been fitted to a chair that no longer existed, and 4 days of work I did not have. I filed it separately on purpose. The fraud case belongs to the state. It is not mine, and I do not get to steer it. The chair is mine. I wanted them in 2 different rooms, on 2 different calendars, because a thing my sister has never understood is that pressure applied twice, 3 weeks apart, is not twice as heavy. It is about 6 times as heavy, because you never get to finish bracing. Her attorney got it continued in October and again in December. In February, she stopped appearing. The judgment came on the 19th of February. $9,200 plus costs, by default. I don't expect to see most of it soon. There is a garnishment order and there is a restitution order ahead of mine in line, and Ohio caps what anybody can take out of a paycheck at a quarter of it, and my sister currently works part-time at a call center in Grove City. $300 a month against $208,000 is the honest ending of a story people want to end with a bank transfer. So I didn't wait for it. I took Teddy to the credit union on Carl Road on a Saturday in March, and I put $1,180 of my own back into his account. And I sat there while the teller printed the slip so he could see the balance on paper, because paper doesn't die at 4 in the afternoon. Then we went and bought the yearly transit pass, and he put it in the clear sleeve behind his ID, and he checked it 4 times before we got to the car. The job coach started in April. Her name is Deb. He complains about her constantly and has never once been late. I have thought a lot about why I did the chair case at all, given that I will probably never collect it. It wasn't the money. It was that in the whole enormous machinery of what happened, the fraud unit, the exclusions, the hearing rooms, the summaries, there was no document anywhere with a wheelchair in it. The state's case is about $208,000 of public money. It is not about a woman in a driveway with 30 people laughing. So I made one. $9,200 in a municipal court file with a manufacturer's assessment attached and the word condemned on the letterhead and a line describing what happened on the 4th of April at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. It will sit in that file forever, and anyone who ever goes looking will find it, and it says what happened in the flattest possible language, which, as it turns out, is the only language I have ever fully trusted. It is the middle of May now, a little over a year since the driveway, and this is where everyone ended up. Delaney pleaded in February. Her lawyer got it down from a second-degree felony to a third, which is what happens when a first-time defendant hands back nothing but agrees to everything, and I had to have that explained to me twice before I stopped being angry about it. 3 years of community control, 200 hours of community service, and restitution of $208,845. which at her current wage is a sentence with no end date, and which is the only part of it I think she has genuinely understood. She lives in an apartment in Grove City. She has no account, no camera, no ring light. Grant took the ring light, of all things. And she is, for the first time since she was 30, not a person anybody is watching. She has written me 2 letters. I have read both. I have not answered, and I am not going to pretend that's noble. It's just true. My mother is 62. She was not charged. She has a recoupment demand she is paying at $40 a month and a letter in a state file that says she may never again act as a representative for another human being, and she works 3 days a week at the front desk of a dental office. She still says she's only joking. About other people now, at the dentist's office, about coworkers. I have heard her do it. It was never about Delaney. It was a lid, and she puts it on whatever is nearest. She calls me on Sundays. I answer about half the time. That is the current shape of it, and I am not looking for anyone's opinion on the ratio. Grant paid the $12,000 back in installments and moved to Indiana in February. Bree deleted her accounts the week after her deposition. All of them. And Teddy is 20 now. He lives in apartment 4B with 2 roommates and a staff person in the evenings, and he works 4 days a week at a garden center off Route 3, where they let him do the perennials, which he says is the good section because you only have to learn each plant once. He rides the 82. He has never lost the pass. He told me in March what he wants. He wrote it on a new index card and taped it inside the closet door of his own apartment, and he read it to me standing there with the door open. He wants to be the person at the garden center who trains the new people, he said, because I know where everything is and I'm good at telling people the actual thing. I said, you are, Teddy. The frame is 4 months old now and it still smells like the shop. The old one, the cracked seat tube, cut down to about 11 inches by a guy at a bike shop who did not ask me why, is on the shelf in my living room holding up one end of a row of books. It is the first thing anyone sees when they come in. Nobody has ever asked about it. I keep waiting. Last Sunday, my brother came over on the bus, and we sat on the step of my building on Indianola, the same bottom step. And it was one of those evenings in Ohio in May, where everything is that ridiculous green that only lasts about 9 days, and the light was going orange the way it does. And a woman came up the walk with groceries, and we shifted over to let her by, and she said thank you. That's all. That's the whole scene. I walked 11 steps that night, from the step to my door, which is 4 more than I had in August, and Teddy walked next to me with his hands in his pockets, not hovering, not watching my legs, because he has never once in his life needed me to prove anything to him. Then I sat down in my chair, in my own doorway, and I did not have to explain it to a single person. I've told this whole thing in a pretty flat voice, and I know that. That's how I got through it, and honestly it's how I got out of it. The flattest person in the room usually is. But I'll say the one thing I actually learned, and it isn't about revenge. It's that the people who decide you're exaggerating have to keep deciding it, every day, out loud, in front of witnesses, in writing. And that is exhausting, and nobody can do it carefully forever. I didn't beat my sister. I just stopped arguing with her and started keeping the receipts she was handing me. So here's what I want to ask you, and I'd really like to know. Is there someone in your family who has decided what you are and just kept saying it until everyone agreed? What did you do? Did you argue, or did you go quiet? Because I'm still not sure I chose right, and I've had a year to think about it. Tell me down in the comments. I read them. I read all of them, which is a habit that has cost me and also, once, saved me. Thank you for staying with me this long. It's a lot of paperwork for a story, I know. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.